Give it a how.
Ja, gaan je kwijt daarom. Thema die één.
Gléidheadh happily. Chain Tenema Horst.
Jessica Nicheljenem en Tenema Horum.
Agus Colaisde how.
Hamia Blues Mills.
Gléidheadh. Agus Catriona de Hocal.
Havna Blues Mills. A goedrug.
Chase Wanya
Oh.
gehad.
Well, until Maher, Jessica, is Clarence, John A, John the Elder, Alistair, Dunya Ella, Dunachy. Agus Malaher, Beach, Rebecca, is Olum, Donald, is John, Red John, no, agus Alistair.
Gléidheadh. Agus Whycocomagh Gaelic a muidje legat.
Oh, bo Alba, bo Ostatua, agus Tyree is a Muck, agus Westeros.
Gléidheadh. Agus inis now am Saverwa.
Kirst.
How are you, Jessica?
I'm fine, thank you, Pauline. How about yourself?
Very well, thank you. And where are you from?
I am from Blues Mills.
Right. And where were you brought up?
And Blues Mills.
But prior to that, I believe you were...
Oh, well, I lived in Riverdale I lived in many places until I was about 9 or so. I started out in Hawkesbury, and then in Tantamagouche, and then in Port Hawkesbury, and then in Riverdale, and then eventually in Blues Mills.
Right. And can you tell us some of your genealogy?
Sure. Well, on the MacLennan side, so my father was Clarence, and then his father was John A, and his father was John the Elder, and his father was Alexander, and then I think there was another John, and then Duncan, the original fellow was Duncan. Mm-hmm. And then on my mother's side, the MacDonalds, so she was Rebecca, and her father was William, and his father was John, Red John, and his father was Alistair.
Timothy Hoodoo Elwas at the Gaelic. How were you introduced to Gaelic?
Well, when I was small, when I was really learning to talk, there was a lot of Gaelic around. There's a lot of Gaelic around. People coming and going from the house. So I probably heard it all the time, till I was, I'd say, about 9. And lots of very good singing. And I suppose that kind of opened it up to me.
Mm-hmm. And Gaelic ag the Farrington, did your parents have Gaelic?
Haro Gaelic ag my Farrington. The fact when agus saints ag my vaher, agus ha mi smynnych the maher a tuiction Gaelic, agus Haro I feelanta, ach vai shenneter ma.
Agus Gaelic amos the skull, knew about Beck.
Haro.
Haro?
Haro.
So there was No Gaelic taught in the school.
No.
Wel Gaelic en Chowach acket.
Well, has mat an na Gaelic ech mo Chowach, the facle no gas, saints, oh, brand no ga, na oran. But Hanyeli Breen.
So you have some sisters and brothers. How many?
Da vragen and da pure.
2 brothers and 2 sisters. And they know some Gaelic, but they're not fluent.
No.
Okay. Well, at Gléidheadh, do they like the music?
Oh, still the carol.
They like the music.
Yes.
Well, at the Goy instruments in me. Do they play any instruments?
Hanyel, well, ha mo fjord a choik na piano. No bad up.
Agus, wel frissacket Njerk and Gaelic and B. Me and Blues Mills. Do you know any Gaelic stories peculiar to the Blues Mills area?
Well, I started Haneachacham Moyin Mo Heen Henner. Ach Jeentje me goed ans na Berla ha mis well, my great grandfather Austrag, when he settled in Blues Mills, at first he lived on what they call the Mullach, which is above Whycocomagh. When he settled in Blues Mills, at that time there was the name Blues Mills actually comes from a family by the name of Blue. They came from Colaisde and they were millers, and they set up 3 mills on the brook in Blues Brook it's called, and they had a sawmill and a grist mill and I'm forgetting, what other kind of mills do you have? Sawmill, grist mill, I can't think, what other? Carding, yes, thank you. So they had 3 mills, so that's where the name comes from, Blues Mills, and it's BLUE'(S), Blues Mills. A lot of people say Blue Mills because they think of Blue Mountain or something, but no, it's Blues Mills. But anyway, he was able to get work now and again at the mill, one of the mills. So this particular day, he was working at the grist mill. So when it was getting on toward evening, it was time for him to head back home. So, there would just be a trail through the woods then. So he was, and it wasn't that far, it was probably, it wouldn't be more than a mile, I don't think. Although not exactly sure, how the path went. But anyway, he started for home, and of course, evening was coming on and shadows and stuff like that. So he became aware that somebody was walking behind him. And of course, at that time, if somebody was, chances were you would know, who it was. So he stopped for the other fellow to catch up with him so they could walk together. But the other fellow didn't. And so he started walking again, and the other fellow's, you can see him at the corner of his eye, the other fellow's following him. And so that was kind of strange that the other fellow didn't come up with him. So after a while, he just called back, who's come behind me? The other fellow never said a word. So that was making him a little bit nervous, So he's walking along, the other fellow's following him. He doesn't answer him. He doesn't come up beside him. So he's getting a little bit nervous. So he called back again. He said, come on, walk with me. No, the other fellow stayed behind him. So finally he swung around. He put his fists up, and he swung around. And he said, okay, but, I'm sure he didn't say buddy, but he said, okay, come on, let's, find out who are you? There's no sign of him. No sign of him at all. So he turned around again. He started for home, and he again he looks, and yeah, the other guy's coming along behind him. So he's starting to get now a bit nervous because he's got a wife and small children back at the cabin, and he's getting, a little, he's worried about them, if there's some stranger on the loose. So finally he just took to his heels and he ran home, the rest of the way home. And he came into the cabin and he slammed the door, and they had a big thing, I forget what you call it, a big stick thing they dropped in, to keep the door shut. We dropped that, and he just flopped down into a stool by the fire. And his wife couldn't imagine what was going on. She was saying, Alistair, what's wrong? What do you... And he was puffing so hard he couldn't tell her. And so she's there, and she starts brushing him off because he was working in the grist mill, and she took a great big straw from behind his ear and tossed it in the fire. That was the stranger. Well, that's the ghost story that wasn't a ghost story.
This, me and Opadackets. We're going to talk there a little bit about your work with Gaelic language and culture. What inspired you to get involved with Gaelic? Is there an individual or a group that stands out as having an influence on you when you first got into learning Gaelic and speaking it and singing it? Maybe your learning experience, your teaching experience you could talk about?
Well, I was always just very fond of it, and just, I loved hearing it, and I loved the singing, and I just always had I suppose I was just positively disposed, toward it. I never felt that, there was anything wrong with it, or we should be ashamed of it, or anything like that. And I suppose my parents had a lot to do with it, because they were great supporters of the language, even though they didn't have it themselves as such. They'd grown up with it, and they really respected the language, and so they encouraged. It's funny, they didn't encourage us to learn the language. Nobody ever encouraged a person to learn the language. Like when I think about it, when I was small, like nobody ever said, "Oh, you should learn that song," or or there was never any any effort to encourage you to learn it. But at the same time, my parents would take us to, like, if there was a Gaelic service or anything, they would take us. Like they really, I suppose they kind of influenced us. And then I had a great aunt who was a great proponent of the language, and
what was her name?
Maud Mackenzie.
Maud Mackenzie.
And she always used Gaelic around us, and I know when my younger brothers and sisters were smaller, she took them and some of their first cousins, and she had a little class with them once a week. And I'm amazed at how much they remember from those classes, really, And she just did that on her own because she, felt it was important. But I think it was just, I don't know, I was just disposed toward it. And so the only reason I went to St. Hawkesbury was so I could go into the Celtic Studies, take the Celtic Studies courses. That was the only reason I ever went there. And I did, and I enjoyed that very much. And then, I was working here and there and everywhere, and there wasn't a lot of Gaelic in the places where I was working. And there wasn't the opportunities there are now. Like now, there's so many of these, Gaelic Bala sessions and workshops, and there was none of that when I, when I was younger. There was just nothing like that. So there were not many opportunities to get instruction, but there were opportunities to hear people, speaking, so, which was good. But anyway, if I took different little classes here and there. Once in a while there'd be something, and I would, try to get there and take advantage of it.
And who was teaching the classes?
I went to classes with Effie Rankin and Marjorie Beaton a couple of times. that was quite a while ago. That was when they first came out from Scotland. They did before they had children and that sort of thing. They were doing classes around in communities, and then John Shaw did classes way back, and Father Rankin, and
Father Janangus Rankin.
Father Janangus Rankin, yeah, and so
he was in Glendale. Right?
He was in Glendale, but he was teaching in Port Hawkesbury. Yeah, because we used to pick him up and head for Port Hawkesbury, and he'd do the class, and I took a class with Sammy McLean. That's quite a few years ago now in Dartmouth.
He's formerly from Riverdale.
Yep. And
cousin of my own.
Yes, yeah. And so but it was kind of sporadic because there wasn't that much. They became more available, a lot more available. People like Jeff MacDonald started teaching classes, and he's still teaching classes. But so for a number of years he was offering classes, and Angus MacLeod from St. Anne's area was offering classes. So there were a number of people started offering classes, and so it just became classes over the last, say, 15 years just became much more available, and a lot more teachers. At one time there was just a handful of people: Hector McNeil, Angus MacLeod, Jeff MacDonald, Joe Murphy. There was just a handful of people, Lewis McKinnon, that were teaching classes, but now there's all kinds of classes. Like if you look at the schedules, like say through the winter, through the spring, across the province, there's really lots of classes and workshops. So the whole scene has changed a lot from when I first started. Mary McLean Hall, she started this milling song group. And it was called An Cleach. That milling song group had a lot to do with kind of revitalizing the milling frolics around the province, because the people in that group made a point of coming down, for example, to the Highland Village when they would have Gaelic days, and taking part in the Milling Frolic, and they used to go regularly to the summer concerts at the Highland Village and take part in that, and they went to the Gaelic days at St. Hawkesbury, and really to any of the sort of the old-time milling frolics that were on the go at that time, and it provided a lot of new singers, and it really made a difference, I think, and I think it had a lot to do with keeping the milling frolics going. So from that time on,
excuse me, where were the milling frolics held?
At that time, there was one at Christmas Island, and there was one at up the North Shore, and there was the one at Johnstown, and that was about it, I think. There would occasionally, those three happened every year, but there were others that happened from time to time. But those were the ones that the ones that happened every year. Like, for example, at the Gaelic Day at St. Hawkesbury, which happened twice a year, there'd be a little milling frolic. Well, not even a little milling frolic; it would be an evening event. So, so there were those, but then there were others that just happened from time to time in different places. And once An Cleach got going, they started having milling frolics in Halifax area. So,
But there were milling frolics in Whycocomagh and Mabel, too, right?
Well, I think there was the one in Mabel, because I know it seems to me they had like a 30th anniversary or something at some point, but I'm not too aware of that one. I know at some point I knew it was taking place and was going out to it, but I don't think I knew about it, long before then, I'd say maybe in the last 10, 15 years, I was aware of that one. There wasn't one in Hogama till there wasn't a regular one. There were occasional ones, but there wasn't a regular one. There were a lot of communities where there was an occasional one, but it wasn't. But those ones that I was talking about, they happened every year.
Mm-hmm.
So
the ones in Whycocomagh, when did they become regular?
This will be the 8th year.
The 8th year?
Yeah.
In 2017?
Yeah.
Great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there was one in Lake Ainsley, Scottsville area. They had a couple of years in a row. They didn't have one last year, but I expect they may have one this year. So there's a few more coming on, but there's, as I said, there's a number of ones that take place, from time to time. I know they have them at the Gaelic College, but I think I'm not sure if there's what you'd call an annual one. I mean, I know they have a lot of smaller ones in connection with various things that go on there, but I'm not sure if you could say they have an annual one or not, like they do at Christmas Island or Johnstown. Well, when I moved back to Cape Breton, I thought I would like to get something going in my own area, and I wanted to get a song group going because I was really missing being part of the Colaisde group, and I thought maybe I could get a song group going. So I started having song classes in the fire hall at home. But once I got into it, I could see that really what people really wanted were language classes. Because, it started working on a song, and they started asking all kinds of questions about, well, what's that word and why is it? So we started doing language classes, and I think I might have done it for a year or 2 years or something. And then I felt they needed somebody more fluent, and so then we started having classes with Jeff MacDonald and Angus MacLeod. And so that's been going on for, I don't know, more than 10 years. But, we still... So then I've done a number of song classes since then, and I haven't done too many language classes in the last while because there's lots of other opportunities. But we do, occasionally we do workshops, like a 4 or 5 hour thing on storytelling or something like that. But when I lived in Sydney for a while, and I had a song class there, and I don't know, I kind of forget after a while. What things I've done like that. But at the Whycocomagh Historical Society, Whycocomagh District Historical Society, they sponsor the Gaelic classes, and they've been very, very good about that. So we're kind of combining the two things. We combine the work of the Historical Society and the promotion of Gaelic in the community together. So they're kind of work the two things kind of side by side. So same people kind of are involved with both. So.
Mm-hmm. And you work a lot around the Milling Frolic. The annual Milling.
Oh yes. I organise that. Yeah. Put on that.
And that's held Frolic. Where?
That's held in the Cameron Hall in Hogama, and this year it's July. I think it's the 14th. It's the Friday anyway. The Friday of that, the 10th, the week that's it's the 14th. It's the week the 10th to the 15th. So it's the 14th that night. Friday night, Cameron Hall, 7:00.
Right, great. You also did some summer work at the MacDonald House in East Ainsley. Can you tell us about the work there? Right.
Wherever I am, I do try to promote the language. So I worked there. I think it was 3, maybe 4 summers. I'm not sure, but I did a weekly Gaelic class while I was there. And then we used to occasionally have a little concert or something. We'd always do some Gaelic singing or a story or something for that. So.
You also worked with the Catriona Gaelic, the Gaelic Council of Nova Scotia. Can you tell us a bit about that, Jessica? When you took over and who was president before you?
Yeah, now in terms of dates, I can't. I'm really not sure. I started with the Gaelic Council. I can't even remember why.
As a member.
Yes, well, yes, but as they have a board, or they did at that, and they have a board of directors. So I started as a director, or I don't call directors, whatever they are. I'm not really sure, and I was, I'm not even sure how many years that was, and then Catriona Parsons was the president, and then I was the vice president under her and then when she finished, I became the president, and
it was around 2006.
Yeah, I would say something like that. Yeah, yeah, and yeah. So I can't even remember that much about it now.
So in that position of president of the Gaelic Council, you worked on some current issues, I imagine, and organised some yearly events with them.
Yes, I know that was when those little. No, was it? Yeah, we designed some kind of a logo. I'm trying to think. Yeah, the logo with the the waves going out.
Salmon.
That right?
Yes.
Yeah. Now I've forgotten all about that.
That was one of the projects.
That was one of the projects.
Well, Catriona worked on that one too.
Yeah, that's when Catriona. Yeah, Catriona was there, I think, at that time.
So that's the official.
Yeah, that's the symbol now for Gaelic. That's right.
Gaelic.
Yeah, and that. Yeah, and now they had that roundsach at St. X at that time. That was like the. I guess it's the universities. Is it that teach Gaelic, or it's a learned thing where people come and present papers and that sort of thing. That was held at St. Vex, and the Gaelic Council was involved with that. And then it was followed by, I forget now what it was called. The first was kind of the academic portion, and then it was followed by kind of more of a folk type of contribution. And I know the Gaelic Council, worked with that, and
there was a good turnout for that.
There was, yeah, it went over very well.
Well advertised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And beyond that, I really can't remember what they were working on.
Okay, are you still involved with the Gaelic Council?
I'm just a member of the council.
A regular member.
Yeah. Well, now I'm as far as teaching or classes or whatever. The Historical Society every year puts on some classes and or workshops on some aspect of Gaelic. We usually do something to do with songs, and then we usually do something to do with the language, maybe just actual teaching, or sometimes workshops on different things. It just, so we sort of do that. So I sort of organize that, find the people and so Catriona Parsons has an Ecumenical Gaelic choir, and we usually do a service during the Gaelic Awareness Month, a Gaelic service. Catriona organizes that herself, and so this choir is not a choir that meets once a week and practices. This is a choir that comes together when there's an occasion, if they're asked to come to something. It's a group of people that are interested in singing hymns, and so they go to various church services they're invited to go, or concerts or what have you, and some they don't go out in the winter, or at least haven't so far. It's mostly from probably about May till October, And some years we might go out 5, 6, 7 times if we're invited, and other years we might go out twice. It just depends. But we usually go at least once a year to Pictou, and we sometimes go to the annual service in the church at the Highland Village, and fairly often we go to the Gaelic College. So it just depends. We're asked, and we go, and sometimes to concerts around Cape Breton. And 2 years ago, we took part in a play, and we went to, I think, 3 or possibly 4 locations where this play was being put on, and took part in that.
And what play was that?
The Ships of something.
1801.
Yeah, 1801. And that was nice. That was fun. We really enjoyed that. So that's the choir. And now you asked about things that I was doing. So one of the things I've done 2, possibly 3 times is arrange a workshop with Catriona on hymns and on psalm presenting. So psalm presenting is a very old tradition from the Highlands and the islands, a way to sing the psalms, and it really comes out of people not having people being illiterate, and even if they were not having access to the printed Bibles and so on. So it was a way for people to learn the psalms, and so that's a very specific way of singing the psalms. So we've had workshops on that, and when the choir goes out, they always do psalm presenting, and then they do different hymns, and some of the hymns are old ones, and some are very new. One of our members, Morag Burke, for example, has composed a number of hymns that we do. So it's a mix of that sort of thing. So really the two main groups that I've sung with down through the years are Mary McLean's Milling Song Group and Gléidheadh, and Catriona Parson's Ecumenical Choir, which does not have its own name. It is just Catriona Parson's Ecumenical Choir. And the people that belong to the choir come from all over the province, and it depends on where we're singing, really, who's there. Like if we're singing on the mainland, then we'll get more people from the mainland. If we're singing in Cape Breton, we get more people from Cape Breton, but it's really something, the way people will travel to take part in the choir's performances. And those workshops with Catriona are really, really excellent, and I would recommend them to anybody, just for the Gaelic, even if you're not particularly interested in singing hymns, but just for the Gaelic. And she also has produced a wonderful book collection of hymns and psalms, and it's very nice to have too. So. Well, I don't know much about it. It's sung from the old country, so it's an old song, and I went on the internet and looked one day, and it was apparently made by an Angus Fraser, and I was listening to an interview one day with an older fellow on that Toparan Dochas. And he said that was took place. He said south of Ullapool. So apparently the stream or whatever was there, according to him anyway. It's an old song, and it was sung here. Really, I think you could go anywhere on the island, and people would be familiar with that song. It's one of those old time ones that everybody was kind of familiar with, and. I remember a friend of mine, remember when we were going to St. Yves, we were talking one day about that song, and she was talking about how when she was a little girl, she could sing, some of it. And so she said, anybody would come in the house, and then, her mother or somebody would say, "Now, Marlene, sing and tell them to it." She'd have to stand there and sing whatever she knew of it. So. But it was that kind of a song, that you teach to a little one, or, it was just like, it was a song everybody knew and liked, so therefore, it could be the ideal one for a little one to, be singing.
And it means, the title means?
Well, it's the Black Brook. The Black Brook, and it's funny. I was singing this very recently, there's they have a little open mic thing at the fire hall in Blues Mills every second Friday, and I go anytime I can, and I always sing some Gaelic songs because it's it's a way to get the Gaelic out there. Plus, people like it; people enjoy hearing the Gaelic. So I was singing that one, and I was thinking this is kind of a foolish song in a way because it's about a man and he's really talking to his gun. And I was saying, what could be more pathetic than a man who has to talk to his gun? But anyway.
So I take it it's a song about hunting?
Well, yes. So what it is, so the Black Brook is flooding and the current's very strong, and he wants to get across the brook to where the deer are, where there's a particular stag or something he's after. And, he's telling the gun, well, he doesn't know if he's going to be able to get over and all this stuff. And he's got a name for the gun. The gun is Morak. So that's what the Black Brook is about. But it was so funny because I was singing it and I always explain what the song is about that I'm singing, so people will know. And then I said at the end, well, he never did get the deer. And some of the men thought that was pretty sad.
He's going to have to try again.
And I was thinking, yeah, that is kind of, if you take it just as it is kind of dumb. It's just about a fellow that can't get across the brook and he never does get the deer. Hadil and juice and out and do canori me do harisher hayek galorem met and through na kaimin ju anole san halt and do hobacher rocks and do ganchuli gachimi le horadik is haradik le bacher stika boadik Sulu hina yawn lion Gléidheadh out on us, my option fair and out and show, and all fair and throw around, a deal and juice and out and do, can worry me dog harisher, I echo on my met and through, like I'm in Jew and ole. He mean a dava hachach cows and walking far and babish gone. San chicken or mundana me can be a kid can go antas. Horse morag she a breakers through na corag shin banacle horse na kvish and feres tress of you. Ma rachres doch o twoata. Hat deal and do's and out and do. And you're me do harishe, I echo on my met and through, na kaimin ju anole.
I guess it is, and roll riv, I was an alpa. We went to Scotland.
Bami on an alpa, darna, let's go. Bami on an alpa bounce in the 70s. I guess down in 2001.
I guess Catriona on an alpa.
Well, ounce in the 70s, Vami backpacking. So, backpacking and hitchhiking. So, kind of went all over the place. Really.
Highlands?
Highlands and lowlands and I was traveling with a friend, and then the friend went. I think we arrived there around the end of June, and then in August the friend went back to Nova Scotia, and I stayed on for a few months till December, I think, and I traveled a bit, but I was also working. I worked with a family.
Did you get to the Hebrides or the islands?
Oh yes, yeah. We spent a fair amount of time out.
So where did you go? To Skye or to South Uist?
I went to Skye and North Uist. That was in the 70s, and South Uist and Barra, and I remember we went to Tiree and Mull. We travelled around quite a bit and up through up in like Inverness and places like that.
Did you hear a lot of Gaelic when you were there?
A certain amount. I remember there was a fellow out on South Uist, his name was John McGuinness, who was a nice singer, and I remember, hearing him sing a few times, but it was funny because at that time the young people were not interested in Gaelic. They didn't seem to appreciate it all, except just the odd one, But, they would all at that time have grown up and probably all able to speak it, but they weren't, they were more interested in rock and roll, So it was kind of interesting. I remember I think that was on South Uist, I remember one of the women saying that sometimes the entire class in school would speak Gaelic, but if there was one English-speaking kid, then they would all go to English. But if there was a class and there were no kids that couldn't speak Gaelic, then they would all speak Gaelic. So that was in the 70s, yeah. Then in 2001, I went over again with my cousin, and we went all over the place. We went up, we went Lewis and Harris and an awful lot of the smaller places, and we went out to the Orkney, and we went all over the place. And we also went 2 different weeks to Selmore Austin. And that was an interesting experience.
Yes.
We took Gaelic classes, and that was interesting.
Very good. Could you talk now about the sort of changes that you have seen in Gaelic in Nova Scotia over the years since you've been involved?
Right. Well, I think the biggest change probably is just, as I was saying before, it's just the availability of opportunities to learn Gaelic and to speak Gaelic and, be involved with the language that, as I said, just weren't there back in the, 60s, 70s, 80s even. So that's been a big change. And of course, now there's defined bodies, like there's the Nova Scotia the Office of Gaelic Affairs, and that, so that has brought, I suppose, some leadership, but it's also bringing a lot of opportunities, like financial opportunities. There's the Gaelic Language and the Community Program, which has funded a lot of the programs, and some of these opportunities for young people to travel to Scotland and vice versa, that sort of thing. The Gaelic Council, of course, is another body that wasn't around, as I said, back in the earlier days, and even the institutions like St. X and Cape Breton University and the Gaelic College have, I think. I wouldn't say that they're necessarily better known in a way, but in another way they are much better known, I think, for their Gaelic programs and so forth. So that's a difference I've seen. But then just in the community, I see a big difference in how people feel about Gaelic. There's still a number of detractors, but you're always going to have that. But I see a lot more interest and awareness, and I think more pride. There's still people out there. I mean, I know people, even my own age group, who have Gaelic who would never admit to it if you held their feet to the fire. But a lot more people have come out of the woodwork, and people in the community, no one knew they had Gaelic, and now they're out there. And I think that the Gaelic Ekbala program has had a lot to do with that. It's I think for a lot of years Gaelic was taught like math, it was a lot of writing on the board and this sort of thing. And I think a lot of Gaelic speakers were intimidated by that. But once they went to the Gaelic Ekbala method, I think it encouraged a lot of people to come forward.
So what would you say, Jessica, has contributed to the increased interest in Gaelic over the last few years?
Well, I think the efforts of different groups that I've mentioned before, like the Gaelic College and St. Avex, Gléidheadh, Cape Breton University, some of these defined bodies, I think, because they do a lot of advertising, and I think that's getting out there. But I think a lot, a certain amount of it anyway, is just the presence in the individual communities, the things that are happening in the communities. If somebody reads something in Gaelic at a service, or somebody sings at a local concert or something, it brings an awareness. It brings an interest for it. There are just so many things going on now to do with Gaelic, and some of the communication tools, like, for example, when you, Pauline, had produced and distributed the media monitor. For those who were getting it, that was a great tool, because we could, there was a nice schedule on it, things that were going on. People could send their information in. Then the Gaelic Council had, and I think still does have, a website where they posted information about what was going on, and different social media outlets, like Facebook and so on. There's a lot of stuff put on that, and a lot of people who are learning and using Gaelic communicate back and forth through Facebook and some of these other social media. So that certainly has an influence, and I think it's just it's that old thing: build it and they'll come. If the more Gaelic things that are happening, the more interest it brings. So it's kind of like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? So do all these things raise the interest, or does the interest lead to these various events? It's hard to say. Well, first of all, I really think children ought to have the opportunity to study Gaelic. If it should be out there along with the other. We seem to have 4 cultural groups. English, French, Mi'kmaq, and Gaelic, and I think that each of those groups really ought to have the opportunity to learn their own culture and language. I don't think that Gaelic is getting a lot of respect in the school system. I think that the teachers are there. We could certainly use more teachers, but the teachers are there, and that are there are trying very hard to fill their role, but I think they're often shunted aside. If they need an extra math period, I think, the Gaelic period can be dropped very readily for that. And I don't think it gets the respect. It's that old thing about diet, dress, and dance. I think the local school boards that when they're offering Gaelic, are very quick to point out that they offer Gaelic because it gives them a little cachet, but when it comes to actually supporting the program and supporting the teachers, I think they fall down badly there. As far as resources, well, I'm not there, so I'm not in the system, so I don't, resources, things change a lot from year to year, so there's certainly quite a lot of online resources, and there is a definite curriculum and some resources to support it, but I don't feel that I'm really qualified to speak, these days about the resources, because I'm not that familiar anymore with it.
So what future do you see for Gaelic in the years to come, Jessica?
Well, I think that's pretty hard to say. I really do think that the language, that there will always be speakers, because of the resurgence in interest and the number of people who are learning and have learned, and we have a surprising number of people who have learned the language and become fluent. I'm quite amazed, when I see or come across people like that. I think the thing is that we have to accept that there's change, and that what went from one generation, doesn't go to the next generation. So while I I really do feel that there will be speakers, and I think there will be people singing that. It's never going to be like it was in my grandparents' day, or in my parents' day, or even in my day, because the culture is not there. And when I say the culture, what I really mean are the traditions and the ways and that went with Gaelic. When people had the language, and even when people were raised in homes, even if they didn't have the language, if the old traditions and things were there, that's not there now. There's just very little of it. I'm talking about things like when you sat around for the evening and talked about your swimming. I mean, it's very rare. I have one cousin, I think, that, we can, we do that. We sit around talking about that. Or just, something as simple as making tea. There was a whole ritual around making a ceilidh and tea. And, when I go to a house now and somebody shoves a cup of tea in my hand and then I'm in the door, it took me a long time to get used to that. That just wasn't the way it was done. And so I think that's going to be gone. But I think, so we have to accept the fact that, things change and evolve. And I think it's great that people are making the effort to learn the language and keep it going. And I think we have to be happy for that and not worry too much about the other part, even if we do miss it. I'm encouraged, as I said before, I'm encouraged by the interest and, the way people look for Gaelic as part of things. And as I said, some of that may simply be due to the fact that, multiculturalism is kind of big now. But, I have a friend and who actually started coming to Gaelic classes with me, and then I was taking Gaelic classes from various people, and we are asked different times to sing together and stuff like that. And we at Christmas time we did a skit in a concert, a Gaelic skit, and people just loved it. So now we've been asked to prepare a skit for the 150th celebration. We're really racking our brains over this one, but it's just stuff like that, people, I mean, as I said, even 5 years ago, I don't think anybody would have asked for that. So
that sounds great.
I do see a future, but as I say, I think the future is not, it's not going to relate much to, but then I think, the Gaelic in my parents' generation didn't relate a whole lot probably to Gaelic and their grandparents and so forth. So, I mean, things just change, So we lose things and we gain other things. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's a lot to be said for diversity.
There is. And I think that, I went up to Gléidheadh a few years ago to see the Acadian Milling Frolic. And, there's a lot going on. There's always been strong ties with the Mi'kmaq community. Mm-hmm. I remember meeting Lee Cremo down at the Highland Village Day concert, and I greeted him in Mi'kmaq, and he greeted me in Gaelic.
Excellent.
So, I think it's important to bring all that out, the toing and froing and the fact that, those groups were well aware of each other.
Yes, and he was a great performer.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yes, he was. Yeah. He's certainly missed off the scene.
Do you have some advice for learners?
Well, I think the advice I give learners is the same advice that people give anybody who wants to start. I often hear writers who are interviewed, and they say, if start writing, and painters, and they say start painting, and I think start. If you won't learn Gaelic sitting there thinking about it. If you want to learn Gaelic, just get right out there and learn Gaelic. And if there aren't any classes in your area, well, there's all kinds of things on the internet if you have internet. Even if you don't have internet, there's all kinds of print and audio resources. So there's lots of things you can do to learn Gaelic. But the most important thing is to start and to keep at it and use every little bit of Gaelic you have. And if all you have is 3 sentences. Well, you just use those 3 sentences over and over until you get your 4th sentence. And just keep at it and learn some songs. That's a great way to strengthen your language capabilities. Get into the songs. But yep, just get at it. That's
Sure.
And every day thinking something in Gaelic every day.
Would you like to add something else, Jessica, before we end the interview? Do you have any other thoughts you'd like to share?
I think I've said this before at different meetings and things. I would like to see more people involving the few Gaelic speakers and semi-Gaelic speakers, elderly ones that we have left. A lot of these people are on their own, and they would love a visit, and it would be very educational for the person who went to visit them. Like I'm thinking one lady who maintains she can't speak Gaelic, but really can, but likes to say that she can't, but has all kinds of words, all kinds of interesting vocabulary and all kinds of stories, and I think this lady is never going to be at a Milling Frolic in Christmas Island. This lady is not going to be at a dance in West Mabel. She's at home and she has all this knowledge, and I think it's a shame that people aren't beating a path to her door. And I find there's a lot of people like that in the community. They're there, but people don't seem to somehow be aware of it or something. I would say, get out in your community and find out who's got all this background and knowledge and go see them.
Well, I think that's something that's been identified by the Gaelic College and why we're doing these interviews.
Yes.
And I hope that you'll share the name of that lady with me, and perhaps we can rap on her door someday and have an interview with her.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank you, Pauline, for taking the time this morning to interview with me.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you, Jessica, for sharing your story with us and for others that will be watching this video in years to come.
Yeah, if that isn't enough to scare a person.
Neela thing.